So would you allow your child to go to school if they're being forced to sit just half a meter next to another pupil? That's the proposal from the Basic Education Minister. Angie Motshekga says she will go to the National Coronavirus Command Council to ask for the physical distancing regulation between pupils to be reduced from 1 meter to half a meter. Now, for context, let me show you how close this actually is. This chair right here is half a meter away from me. I measured it myself. Now, this move comes as the department struggles to safely accommodate all primary school pupils in line with the initial recommendation of 1.5 meters. Let's get more on this story. Elijah Mhlanga is the Basic Education Department spokesperson. He joins us now live. So, Elijah, I just want to start with the scientific proof that the department is using to measure whether half a meter is still safe during this pandemic.
No, Shahan, I think let's start by saying that no child will be forced, just like no child has been forced to sit next to another this week when children were allowed to come back to school at primary school level with the 1 meter social distancing. What we said was that we are implementing what we call a risk-adjusted, differentiated strategy, which means where it is possible, schools must do it. But if it is not possible, to return all learners and still be able to maintain the 1 meter distance, it should not happen. So, same with this proposal. It is a proposal that the medical experts need to further deliberate on, and the NCCC must also talk about, and Cabinet must make a final decision about it. It's not something that the minister is pushing ahead with, but as a Minister of Basic Education, she has a responsibility to continue to seek solutions that are going to help us mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on the schooling system.
Okay, so you say it's not forced. I totally get that. But the reality is that if it goes to this point where it's 0.5 meters, children who will have to go to school or decide to stay at home if they don't feel safe. Ultimately, they don't have a choice. It's either they go to school and accept the 0.5 meter rule or stay at home, which puts them at a disadvantage.
There is a choice that schools have been asked to make, to either platoon, which means you bring one group in the morning and another in the afternoon, or you alternate either on a daily rotational or on a weekly rotational. And that's what schools have been doing. We have seen letters going out to parents, even this week, from schools that were saying, we are not able to accommodate all the children. We tried for a day. We see that it's not working. We are returning to the rotational approach. And we say, fine, because we said the risk assessment needs to happen at school level together with the district. The school needs to make a decision on whether it is able to do so or not. So that's where we are. It is a proposal that is aimed at ensuring that we avoid the generational catastrophe that is currently unfolding with every day that learners are not in school, based on research that we have received, indicating that the learning losses are actually much, much more than what we are aware of.
So talk to me about the scientists or the experts that you've used regarding this information and, of course, recommendation to Cabinet to go ahead with it. Who are they?
Well, as the Ministerial Advisory Committee, remember, the Department of Basic Education does not work outside the guidance of the Department of Health. We have maintained this position from the start. We say that everything that we do, if the Department of Health says it cannot happen, we will not do it, because it is the department that is leading and guiding the country in its response to COVID-19. So ours is to make proposals. If a proposal is shot down, we accept and move on, because we are not medical experts. COVID is a public health challenge that we are part of in terms of fighting it. And as a sector, we need to contribute in that regard, and we'll continue to do so. There isn't a single decision or a single step that the department has taken without consulting its stakeholders. It continues to do so. We meet on a weekly basis with all the teacher unions. Every Saturday afternoon, we meet with them and we discuss issues. this is one of those issues that will be discussed as well. We know they've asked for a meeting with the department. That is going to happen, and the matter will be clarified at that level.
Okay, Elijah, there are two things that I need to pick up on what you said. You mentioned the Ministerial Advisory Committee. Have you went to them to seek clarity or any advice regarding the 0.5 meter rule at all?
Yes, at working group level, remember there are different structures and there are very many. Even when you go to net joints, you find that there are work streams that are focusing on the different parts of the campaign against COVID-19. So there is that technical advice that says we need to open schools at full capacity for as long as we are able to keep a social distancing that will ensure that learners are safe. So it doesn't say that the safety protocols will not be followed. They still need to be followed because they're critical in the fight against COVID. I mean, just like in May we made a proposal to say schools at primary school level need to go back. And we got approval for that. And that's what we've seen this week. So whatever proposal that is there, it is not for immediate implementation. It is for us to say at some point in the future, we need to think of returning and stabilizing education to the extent that we're able to minimize the impact of COVID-19 on schooling. So those things the sector will continue to propose as we also monitor the behavior or the conduct of the coronavirus in society. So we don't lose sight of that.
Okay, so I spoke to Professor Kuleka Mlisana, who's the co-chairperson of the Ministerial Advisory Committee, about this move, firstly with the 1 meter and then the proposal of 0.5 meters. She said that it wasn't a good idea. So you have the co-chairperson of the MAC saying it's not a good idea, but you're still going to weigh your options regarding this.
No, we are not weighing our options. Remember, this matter must be formally deliberated on at the appropriate forums. That's why I'm saying the NCCC must consider it, even if they say no. Cabinet must also consider it, even if they say no. So that's where it has to go. Yes, a committee, a working committee somewhere has said it's not a good idea, but it must still go to the proper and the appropriate forum where the no will be formalized so that we stop talking about it. That's what we are saying. So it is not for the minister to decide, it's for her to have received the advisory and for her to then take the advisory forward to the bodies that make decisions about the interventions that we need to put in place in order for us to get our business going while we take into account the safety measures around COVID-19.
All right. And then you mentioned consultations with unions, and you're meeting them this weekend. As you know, several teacher unions issued a statement yesterday slamming the department for not consulting about this 0.5 meter proposal. So how do you consult with unions or say that you have a proposal before consulting with unions? Because that's what's happened here now. You're going to consult with them at the weekend, but the minister's already said that we are considering this.
No, there's a process. Before you propose something or before you take something to stakeholders to say, here's a proposal, you deliberate on it first within the sector. Because if you have nothing formal to take to the unions, then there's nothing to discuss. So that's why we're saying the meeting will clarify the position, will clarify. Most of the things, if not all of the things that we take for consultation would already have been deliberated on in the sector within the department in consultation with the CEM, who are the Council of Education Ministers, which is provinces, MECs and HODs. So that's where things would have been deliberated on before they are taken through for consultation with stakeholders. So we didn't even go there. There isn't even that first step towards that direction. It's just a matter that it's there for public to talk about because the minister mentioned it based on the document that she received from the health experts. It's not a problem that we talk about it because it also helps in getting people's initial responses to a matter as important as this one, because at the end of the day, the children belong to all of us. We all have a responsibility to take care of them. So the decisions that we make must be carefully thought through, and there would have been a product of consultation before any implementation can take place.
Elijah, is all of this happening, even you considering a 0.5 meter social distance in classrooms, is this all happening because schools were not adequately prepared for the return of all primary school pupils, despite this being announced in May?
No. It is happening because the learning losses are so huge that every research that is coming out is indicating to increasing dropout rate. Initially, we experienced as a sector a loss of some 1.2 million children who did not come back to the education system after schools were forced to close last year. And this year, another research, the NITSCREM survey, indicates that an additional 500,000 learners have not come back. That is just one loss. I'm not even talking about the actual learning losses in terms of reading, numeracy, and literacy, which is suffering even more. One of those research studies, by the way, it says that we have lost up to 50 to 75% of the learning losses between last year and this year, which means now it said that a child who is in grade 3 in June 2021 is equivalent to a child who is in grade 2 in 2019, which means a whole year has gone without any meaningful learning having taken place. And we are looking into the future to say, what impact will this have on the country as a whole? And as a sector, what responsibility do we have to come up with solutions that will help us minimize the impact of COVID-19 on the schooling system in the country?
Also get that, but the question about adequately preparing is one regarding social distancing. Was there no way you could have prepared with additional, structures at schools so that we could maintain proper social distancing? And obviously that means money, which the department clearly doesn't have as well.
That's correct. We don't have the money, but there are schools that are able to receive all the learners at once at full capacity. There are schools that cannot, because the schools were never designed to have children with a distance of 1 meter or 1.5 meters. It was never like that. So fortunately, some schools have been built in that way, and they are able to accommodate all the learners, but not all of them. In fact, the majority were never designed in that particular way. So it would mean a complete change of the infrastructural design of the physical environment of where learning and teaching has to take place. But what then do you do after such a huge expenditure and the coronavirus is gone, everyone is vaccinated? What then do you do with what you'll be left with? It's going to be another issue that is really unsustainable. So we are looking and working carefully at looking at options that are sustainable, those options that will be effective and meaningful in terms of the recovery and catching up of the curriculum loss that we've seen suffered as a sector.
Of course, there are many schools that were shut down over the years, and this is before COVID-19 as well, when it comes to the number of pupils in classrooms. We're now dealing with overcrowding in classrooms, and I guess the pandemic really raises the reality of how overcrowded our classrooms are in South Africa. Can the department do anything to address this in the long term?
Yes, some schools are overcrowded and others are empty. It depends where you are. The economic situation has also impacted on the structure of society as we have it today. We have seen a huge migration from the rural areas to the cities and the towns, and that is also evident when it comes to school admission. You find that every little town, there's no space for education, and the townships and villages, there's no one there. And for the simple reason that people are moving to the urban centers looking for employment opportunities because the unemployment is rising because of the economic conditions that the world and the country is going through at the moment. So that is one of the impacts or the causes of the imbalances in terms of the usage of the physical structures that we have. And the Eastern Cape announced 2 weeks ago that 1,200 schools have since been closed because there's no one there. And those schools, because they're too small, they become unviable and become too expensive to run. So what you then need to do is to merge schools, close others, and try, get value for money and get learners to learn effectively where there will be enough teachers and proper facilities. So you have that. I mean, you would have to force people back to the villages if you wanted to really minimize overcrowding in some schools, because those schools that are overcrowded are mainly in the cities and urban centers.
Yeah, I don't know, value for money and safety and education. I don't know if you can use all those sentences in one go, Elijah. But, you know, ultimately this half a meter, which we're showing on camera now, this chair that's so close to me, is a concern that many parents will have, right? Because if I had a child, I certainly wouldn't want them to go and sit that close to anyone else, especially given this pandemic. So the question is, how do you work around it? And you're talking about rotational classes and lessons for schools, but you're also talking at the same time about the high dropout rate in schools. And if we go ahead with trying to teach pupils this way, that dropout rate is definitely going to increase. Well,
the 0.5 meters that you say people are concerned about is the same one that is applicable in the buses and the taxis and the aeroplanes that people are using every day. So it's nothing peculiar to education. It's already there in other sectors.
Yes, maybe we shouldn't bring it to education. Who will always keep their masks on.
Yes, you're correct. But then the science, as you say, the science in terms of children, it says that the mortality rate is the lowest. The risk, the biggest risk is among adults. And in this case, it's the adults who are sitting at that estimated distance of 0.5 in a taxi, in a bus, and in an aeroplane. So it's actually the opposite of the point that you probably want to make.
No, it's not, because you have children who are not responsible enough to keep their masks on and then go home and possibly infect their gogos and parents who are, of course, at higher risk. So that's the impact, ultimately, of having children so close. We know that the schools are overcrowded. We know that one educator cannot monitor 40 pupils to make sure that they always have their masks on, because we're talking about kids here in primary school.
No, you're correct. You don't have one teacher monitoring all the children for masks. We have assistants who are there. Schools have made sure that there is capacity that is there. But remember, you don't have all those 40 children in one classroom at the same time at the moment in schools which do not have the spaces to do that. That's why we said, where you are not able to have all the children, all the 40 children in your classroom, cut them in half so that you manage half the capacity of that classroom so that learning and teaching can take place. So that's what we're doing now. No one is forced to have children overcrowded in the class. What happened, in fact, this week, what we observed, and schools were telling us when we visited, is that schools did not say that children must come back because schools knew that they were not going to be able to accommodate them. But what happened was that parents released their children to school. And one of those reasons is the fact that in school, they're able to get their meals from the school nutrition program, which they are not able to benefit from when they are home. Most of these children, that meal is the only one that they have. So for them to be in school every day, it means that they've got a sustained supply of that all-important meal that they would otherwise not have access to. So those are some of the things that are making parents to release their children to want to go to school. So it's a complex matter. We all need to chip in and to bring in our suggestions to say this is how the basic education sector can go forward, try stabilize the sector, try get some teaching and learning going on while we work together to ensure that everybody is safe in school and elsewhere.
All right, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. Elijah Mhlanga is the Basic Education Department spokesperson.